when I travel, I put my earbuds in and I don't talk. And I think if I went back 20 years, I would tell myself, talk to the person next to you on the plane, talk to the person at the airport, because you just never know. And I don't do enough of that. So I'm kind of guilty of not taking my own advice, but definitely keep building those relationships. Like, you just never know who you're sitting next to.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Dylan.
And I'm Dallas.
This is Living Vividly. Our goal with this show is to inspire you to live a more vivid life.
And in this episode, we sit down with Jon Ferrey, a very impressive sports photographer. His photos have been featured on the cover of Sports Illustrated, Time Magazine, and so much more. He's actually also Dylan's uncle, which is pretty rad. But in this episode, we really dive into why relationships are the keys to so many doors that we're looking to open in our lives. And secondly, why we shouldn't let the fear of failure hold us back from what makes us truly happy. Hope you enjoy this episode.
Thanks for watching.
Too many things I haven't done yet. There's too many sunsets I haven't seen. There's too many things I haven't done yet. There's too many sunsets I haven't seen.
What's happening, everybody? We are super stoked to have Jon Ferrey on with us today, a professional photographer who has created a pretty awesome life doing what he loves to do. Jon, thanks so much for coming on today, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So just to give everyone a high-level overview of who you are and what you do, can you kind of give a little elevator pitch?
Yeah, so I'm a professional sports and athlete photographer. I've been doing this, 21 years now, making me feel old. But so I travel around pretty much the world a lot, mostly domestically, covering sporting events I'm a freelance photographer, so it can be clients across the board for Sports Illustrated, for Nike, for NASCAR, you name it. And so I travel quite a bit, about 25 to 27, maybe 30 weekends a year. And so it's a lot of time on planes and hotels, but I'm doing what I love. I get to go out and go to cover sporting events or meet great athletes and shoot them in studio, work with a lot of great people across the board, and just, develop a lot of these relationships over 20 years. And it's been a lot of fun. I've never really worked a day in my life, to be honest.
That's so cool.
So obviously I just will tell the listeners, Jon is my uncle. So that's kind of a cool connection there. And, but I actually don't really know how you got into photography, because were you studying photography in college, or how did that start?
So I grew up in California, in Berkeley, and I went to Berkeley High. And I think my freshman year took your beginning black and white darkroom photography class. This was back in the 90s. So that digital hadn't even come out yet. So you're learning, the basic process of developing film, exposing film, making prints, all that fun stuff in a darkroom. Yeah. And my teacher at the time kind of came up to me one day and said, "Hey, I kind of like what you have. I think you would be a good addition to the school paper." So for 4 years, did the high school newspaper, and I really kind of had this affinity for sports. I was an athlete myself, but just enjoyed covering sports, basketball or water polo, swimming, whatever it might be. For the high school paper was a lot of fun. That then grew into college. I went to UCLA, and I studied German and art history, never photography, but again, worked for the Daily Bruin. And being UCLA, they had just a huge wide world of sports. I mean, everything you could imagine was there, and it was really high level. And I really kind of got my first taste of kind of that professional life as a photographer when UCLA went to the national championship in basketball in 1995, and they won. So I got to go actually travel to Boise, and they played in whatever, the Taco Bell Arena back then, and had like this amazing, like, last second, like, full court shot to win the game. And it was like mayhem, and I was there, and it was fun. I got to go kind of see this side of life, sitting around all these Sports Illustrated photographers and, professionals who you look at the magazines. I know that name. And here I am sitting next to them. And I was, 18 or 19. I even had I remember clearly that was the weekend I had my fake ID taken away in Boise.
They're still good at that here.
Probably still hanging on the wall. I can't remember, in Gillies or one of those bars down there. But anyways, that moment kind of created a spark. It kind of lit a fire in me a little bit. I did a year abroad after that in Germany, and at that point when I came back, I was really focused on, I want to make this happen. And I kind of decided at that point, I'm going to pursue it, be a professional photographer. And at the time, I had a good friend who was working at this little mom and pop kind of boutique sports agency in LA. And they were really well known as like the cream of the crop, like the best photographers in the world for sports. And I got a job there, like working in the library. I mean, suit and tie every day, like filing slides away. And it was very crappy work, but it exposed me to this world of seeing great imagery day in, day out, right in my hands. I could look at it and file it away. And it just kind of built this memory bank of amazing imagery that when I got the opportunity, I would go out and try to mimic and try to, do what they were doing. And through a couple of years, I eventually got my break, and they hired me as a full-time photographer after going out on the weekends and, on my own, not getting paid for it, just going out, and I get the access, like to go to a basketball game or a swimming tournament or a golf tournament. And one of the things that I was really kind of focused on, not really focused, but I kind of fell into it, was one of my jobs in the library was to refile all the motorsports photography. And I didn't know anything about motorsports. And I'd heard names like Andretti and things like that, but I didn't really know anything about it. I wasn't a fan. I didn't watch it. But that type of photography was really colorful and it kind of graphic, and it just really caught my eye. Something was interesting photographically. And I ended up going out and getting hired to go shoot some races, just kind of like as a thank you for doing all this filing in the library. So I went out, and the guy who brought me out really said, "You've got an eye for it. You should go after this." So I started doing a lot of racing. And still to this day, 20 years later, I'm still doing a lot of racing. And it's just kind of growing into this life, almost like a lifestyle now. So
yeah,
it's been fun.
That's cool. Honestly, I've heard like bits of that story, but never from the beginning to like where you are now. And you were just with Danica Patrick for the last, is that over now, or is it half over?
Yeah. One of my big current projects is, I've been shadowing Danica Patrick. I've known her and covered her for 16, 17 years now, since she was really young coming up. And about 4 months ago, when she had her last full season of racing, she announced her retirement. She's going to do 2 more races, the Daytona 500 and the Indy 500. And she asked me if I would cover it for her, to kind of document her last 2 races before she kind of hangs up for good. So she just completed the Daytona 500, and it was kind of all access, just shadow her. And I'm kind of doing this black and white, real photojournalistic style of photography. It's been really, really cool because it's just, all access, like intimate moments, like with her family, things like with fans you wouldn't necessarily see, and it's not all in the public eye. And it's just been a really cool experience to go out and see how you build a relationship and then take that to the next level professionally, and and get paid well to go take pictures.
Right. And so she reached out to you and said like she wanted you to capture these moments. That's awesome.
Like I said, long enough, and she has enough trust in me. Like there's a lot of photographers who, it's building a relationship of trust, that you're not going to do anything with the photos that she doesn't approve of, but also, that you're going to step away and give space when it's needed, that you're not going to be like in her face all the time, making it uncomfortable. It's just kind of
totally.
So, like a TMZ thing.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm interested in sort of that transition. Obviously, you kind of took, like you mentioned, not the best job in the world, but an opportunity in which you could, be around the best, and really start kind of honing that. And then you worked for this agency that hired you full time. And then they kind of gave you your jobs, and then you went as a freelancer at some point.
Yeah. So when I was still in college and I was working for the Daily Bruin newspaper, I realized I got to the point where I was a senior and I was teaching everybody, but not learning anymore. And I said, I need to transition out of this. That's why I went to the agency and got this job there and immersed myself where I can learn and learn more about the craft, learn more about photography, learn about imagery, learn about being a professional photographer and not just, a hobbyist. And just putting myself in that position to learn and just absorb all this information and then also getting the access. Being there really gave me the access. And that was probably the biggest hurdle to overcome in the whole process is you can go out and shoot, your brother's lacrosse game, but to get access to an NFL game is very difficult. So you have to have someone who will hire you to do that. And that was the biggest key, is getting the access to get into these events. And by working at this agency, that opened a lot of doors. And I was surrounded by a lot of other photographers who were just all willing to share. It was kind of like an apprentice program where they would take you under their wing and show you the ropes. And then after like 2-3 years, they would send you off on your own. You're good to go. So it's, that was a big transition in my career. I was there for 12 years, going all over the world, Australia, Japan, Argentina. I'd go to events all over the place. And then in 2008, I transitioned to becoming a freelancer. So basically, rather than someone handing me my jobs, I have to go chase them down and make them now. So that was a big change, really big hurdle to an obstacle to overcome in my career was figuring that out. Cause it's a totally, you have to hustle. You have to go after business. You have to constantly have meetings. You're spending a lot of time doing things that photographers don't necessarily love to do.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be behind the camera. We want to create imagery. We don't want to have to go send emails, call people, go have meetings, discuss this and then not get work, so it can be a very frustrating part of the business is hustling. And that's probably the biggest challenge I have even to this day. I've been freelancing almost 10 years, but it's constantly always a challenge. The business is always changing. The biggest change I think was from film to digital. That opened, Pandora's box to everyone being a photographer. The second biggest is the iPhone. Everyone has an amazing camera in their pocket now,
right?
And in a format like Instagram or something to showcase their work and put on these cool filters, so a lot of I'm not saying the talent or like the eye of the photographer has been stripped away, but it's allowed so many more people to become photographers that now I'm competing against so many more people to get jobs, and people who have very little experience maybe are getting work. I know people who are getting hired by like Adidas they're influencers who have a huge Instagram account and they're getting paid money to go take pictures of people running or shoes or whatever it might be, So it's changed the business a lot and the industry as a whole as to what I have to do to constantly get better jobs or more consistent work. And because there's 100 people behind me in line who will do it for nothing, So
Totally.
It's a tricky industry, just like every other one out there, to have to always adapt and learn.
Mm-hmm. And I would assume, but I imagine there's more that it's anyways, is that differentiator is obviously your experience. And then I would guess it's also the relationships that you've built over so many years. Is that kind of what is allowing you to stay up and ahead of it?
Absolutely. And it kind of ebbs and flows. There's times where I'm not getting work and then times where I'm getting a lot of work. You just never know. But relationships are the key. Like I just got a call last week from a guy I haven't worked for in probably 6 years. but he called me with this project in mind because we've stayed in touch. We've had coffees, you know, sent him notes here and there. And there's this really cool job that might come up because of a relationship that you've maintained over the years. And that's the number one reason why I'll keep things going well is because you keep your relationships. But number two, like you talked about experience, you mentioned experience. You can never, you know, some people say, oh, well, you're older, you're not going to be this young gun anymore. Like, but I think as you get older, your experience only grows, and that's more of an asset than anything. Yeah, maybe I'm not as fast or I have a different style, but experience in knowing where to be, when to be there, what lens to have, how to shoot, all these things matter at the end of the day. And I think clients want to hire me for that reason. So
Gotcha. I'm interested. Okay, to take it back a little bit in time. At that point, you said you came home from Germany and you decided that this is what you wanted to do, right, and you wanted to go after that. Was there an opportunity cost of going after it, or was it kind of just like, I'm going to be like, why, what happened in Germany, I guess, to make that decision? And did you have something else you were playing it against, or? No,
not necessarily. I think being abroad and being exposed to so much, like culturally so much more, being able to travel over Europe and see just a whole new side of life. You know, you do a lot of, you know, self-reflection and introspective moments and things like that. But ultimately I decided, you know, photography is something that makes me happy. Like it truly, like once I'm behind that camera, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but I don't have a worry in the world kind of attitude. And, but transitioning that into a profession is a whole nother obstacle. And when I came back from Germany, I guess maybe I was weighing it against, if I don't do this, I've got a German and an art history degree. What am I going to do with that? You know?
Yeah.
So, it's never been in my DNA to like sit at a desk and sit behind a computer. I mean, there's times I have to do it, obviously, but I didn't want to face that as my future, I suppose. This is the best way to put it. And ultimately decided I've got to be proactive and find a way to channel this talent I have and make it a means of living. So I think to get back to your question, maybe it was the fear of sitting behind a desk the rest of my life. Maybe, I don't know. So, but that said too, like I had to, you know, invest in gear. Like it was expensive to get off the ground. I mean, like took some savings, took some money, and you know, spending $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to get the gear you need was a, you know, especially at a young age, right out of college, was one of the bigger obstacles that I have to, you know, encounter as well. I had some help with, you know, family was very supportive, not only somewhat financially, but also, you know, just supportive in letting me pursue this as a career, as opposed to saying, well, I think you're not going to make any money. It's not a wise choice. Like you should be a doctor, go work at a bank or whatever it might be. They were very supportive in allowing me to go after something. And in the end, I think a lot of people I talk to, I mean, not just family, but friends, relatives, they've always kind of followed my job by, you know, back in the day, it was looking at the paper. Oh, look, there's Jon. He's at a golf tournament. Or here's Jon. He was at a football game. He got the cover of Sports Illustrated, whatever it might be. So it was kind of pre-social media. That was how family and friends could follow what I was doing, is literally opening the paper one day and seeing my name there. And picture, which is always kind of a cool. I would get a call or email or something that way.
What's your favorite cover that you've gotten the cover of?
Probably Sports Illustrated. About 4 years ago. When, Marcus Mariota, he played for the Oregon Ducks. I got a cover, and sometimes they just kind of have like a action shot or something. But I actually really liked the picture they used for the cover, which was like this kind of funky light. There was like a fire or something. So it was like orange smoky light and the sun was setting, and they actually used it really well on the cover, which I was happy with. So
do you ever like send a batch of pictures to people and then they just choose the picture that you're just like, I can't believe
exactly.
He does that.
For that job, it's like I sent them, you know, whatever, 1,000 images, and I put the trust in the editors on their end to pick the right ones. And the guy who hired me for that actual job, I knew he was going to do it because he's a good editor. So
have you gotten any other cover? Have you gotten Sports Illustrated at a different time too?
Maybe for like a special
racing
edition or something, but not the weekly magazine. But I've had, the cover of
New York Times, right? Even on
New York Times, like LA Times or Time Magazine, some international magazines, like I've got like this big case full of clippings.
Covers.
Yeah. Is
that like for a photographer, for sports photographers, especially in your industry, is that like pretty rad, or like what's like a measure of like,
yeah,
oh, that's awesome. Like
it's always fun. Yeah, it's always fun to see your work in print. Big, like a 2-page spread or the cover, or even like a billboard driving down the street can be fun. But those days are far and fewer between. Like just now it's like, I swear 75 to 80% of my stuff is probably social media. Like that's the end use. And
wow.
So it's not as impressive. You're looking at a square that big and you're scrolling through and you see it for about 10 seconds. So that's kind of what it's come to, but at least someone's using the pictures and paying the bills. So I can't complain about that side.
Yeah.
Do you do any like side projects? I remember the portrait book that you did a while ago. Is there anything else like that you have been focusing on lately?
I try to, but time, it all comes down to time. And we haven't even talked about balancing family, and we can get into that. But when I do have time, projects on the side have been great. I've done a couple, about 10 years ago, I did this one project. It was portraits of homeless youth in Portland. So, 15 to 20-year-olds, like who basically live on the street or are in transition housing. I worked with this ministry to go along and meet these kids, take their portrait, talk about their situation. And it was just this really cool experience. I did it for about a year, kind of got this nice little portfolio of just these amazing, but yet tragic stories of these kids, and how they got there, how they got off the street or still on the street, but there's something completely out of my wheelhouse, very different. And ultimately, I think I learned way more about myself through the project than I did about anyone else. And that was very rewarding, I think, to do that. Wow. But I've also done other projects where if I travel, like I went to Tokyo one time for work, for a race, but got to go hang out in the city for a few days after, and just street photography there, things like that, which pique my interest, but an opportunity, you might as well seize it while you're there and do it. 'Cause it's just fun.
Totally.
Yeah. So I guess transitioning into kind of family and work-life balance, like you mentioned, did you say how many, 25 to 30 weekends a year?
In that range, yeah.
So a lot of traveling, especially throughout the years. I'm sure it's been different every year. I have two things. Family, number one, like kind of balancing what you love to do as your career and family. And number two, travel, just as in general, how has travel affected you, whether it's positively or like your mindset, whatever it is, opening it up to different cultural things. Anyways.
Well, the family part it's changed through the years. My kids now are 12, almost 13 and 10. So when they were really young, they didn't know I was gone. When they got to a little older, they noticed Dad's gone. And now I think they're kind of used to it, but I want to be there more for them, like they're going to be out of the house before I know it. And so I'm always looking to transition into less of a travel, shoot more stuff locally or more in-house. That would be where I live here in Portland. But so that's always been an important balance in my life, but can be tricky because there's times, especially as a freelancer, where it's difficult to say no to certain jobs. I have that freedom to say yes or no anytime, to take a month off if I need to. But at the same time, there might be weekends, 3-4 weekends in a row that I might work and be gone, missing a lot of stuff at home. So keeping that balance is super important, but it can be tricky. And it's always a juggling act, having a super supportive wife is helpful, and having kids that understand is helpful. But there's times where I have to get on that airplane and go to another hotel, and you know, I'm not saying I'm not grateful, but there's times where you're like, oh, really, I got to do it again. But that's just the reality of any job, I think, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
And then, as far as travel, I mean, I've traveled my entire life, so I really enjoy traveling. Recently I've been traveling a lot to the same cities, I guess. Like, you know, I'll go to Dallas 3 times a year. I'll go to Florida 3 times a year. So it's always fun to throw in something new and different. Like later this year, I'm actually going to South Dakota for a golf tournament, which I've never been to South Dakota. I've got like 5 states I need to check off my list, and that's one of them. So I'm excited for that. A couple years ago, I got to go to Maine for work. So just things that when you mix it up and keep it fresh, that's always a plus. And that's, as a creative, the most important thing. But I thoroughly enjoy traveling, like always going to a nice city or going to a city, find nice food. I mean, every city these days has like some craft brew place and a nice restaurant. So I like search those places out. But the actual sitting in the airplane and going back to another hotel room, I mean, I guess you can call me a travel snob. I've been doing it so long. If I'm not upgraded, I'll get upset, you know, stuff like that. It's, you know, it's one of those things, like being on the West Coast and traveling the East Coast is tricky. It's difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. What about around the world? Do you have any favorite locations that you've got to experience?
I haven't done a lot of international travel lately, but I've traveled basically every continent except Africa for work, I think. So, I mean, for me, the places I loved, and I think it's, now that I have kids, I probably don't do it as much, but kind of going to some off the cuff, like Mexico City or Uruguay, places that, you know, are a little rough on the edges, maybe, are always kind of fun. But probably my favorite place to travel for work has ever been Tokyo in Japan.
Really?
Just an amazing place.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, Dylan, you were just there recently, and your dad's there, but the culture is so friendly, so peaceful.
But way different too, yeah.
Extremely different from American culture, like completely different. So it's like, yeah, it's just it's hard to describe. I mean, I tell people, go watch Lost in Translation. You'll kind of get an idea of what it's like. But you actually don't understand how real that movie is until you're there. So it's like just kind of this mind-bending, eye-opening experience going there. So that was really fun. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
Oh man,
I'm curious. What would you say? So there's a lot of people I know that you know, kind of in our generation that are trying to chase something that they're passionate about, but they're maybe worried or they don't know where to start, or you know, all those sorts of things that might hold them back from going after a career, which is such a big part of their life of what they actually love to do. What advice, what counsel would you have for some people that are on the edge of, you know, trying to figure out, you know, if they should go for it or if not, or they have reservations, that sort of thing?
Well, it's always going to be a leap of faith in some respects. I think you have to just ask yourself, do I love this? Am I passionate about it? Does it make me happy? I mean, quite simply, are you happy doing this? Because if you're unhappy doing something else, you're kind of wasting your time, I think. I mean, go after something that's going to make you happy and just go for it. And if you fail, big deal. You can always fall back to that unhappy thing, which is unfortunate, but go for the happiness. Go for that, something you're truly passionate about. I mean, seek out people, seek out like-minded people, seek out people who are interesting, and build relationships with them, because that is, you're going to find somewhere in that relationship, that connection of like, oh, this will work. I can do this. Let's get together. Let's make it, you know. And that's just how I ended up getting my job, getting my start. And that's 21 years later, I'm still getting paychecks. So I can't complain. I mean, you really just have to go after meeting the people that you think will open the door for you. And they're out there. It's just a matter of finding them. You just hone your talent. Like if you're a photographer, I mean, go shoot pictures every day, whether it's on your phone, whether it's with your expensive camera, whatever. Just go take pictures and build a portfolio, build a really cool Instagram page, whatever. That's your key to getting in the door. I mean, that's your portfolio. That's your resume. I haven't had a job interview in 21 years. I don't know how to make a resume. I never need to make a resume because my resume is my body of work. And that's what you need to, show proudly to the people, get it in front of their faces. And that will, eventually one day that right person will go, that's the photo I like. I want to hire you for the job,
I love that. That's unbelievably like simple yet practical advice, especially for people in our generation. I mean, that's something that people could literally go out tomorrow and start doing and making happen. So I love that.
I mean, they're not going to fall in your lap. That's the key though. Like they're not going to fall in you. You got to go find them. And that's the difference.
That's awesome. Where is before the last deal, where is, I guess, are you on social or your website and stuff? Where's the best place to kind of find you so we can
it's
pick you up?
Pretty easy. My website is just my name, Jon Ferrey, so JonFerrey.com, and my Instagram is the same, JON
on the Instagram. Cool. And do you have anything? We'll definitely link that up below in the bio of everywhere this is going to be. So everyone can kind of follow you and check you out and all your work, which is awesome. Is there anything lastly exciting going on for you in the next maybe this upcoming year, whatever?
I've got that. I'm finishing up that Danica Patrick project. Her last race, the Indy 500, is May. Next month, she's going to do kind of a test run. She hasn't run an Indy car in 6 or 7 years, so that'll kind of a little refresher to get back in the car. But that's always, if there's one sporting event in one day that I would say anyone needs to go to, it's the Indy 500. It's just this amazing spectacle. So just the energy is pretty cool to be there and to see 300,000 people in one spot and then all these cars. It's pretty cool. So I'm excited for that to come down the pipe in May. But other than that, it's, kind of usual, I got some basketball games and some golf tournaments and more races coming up, but that project is definitely going to be the highlight of my year, professionally, for sure.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Last question. We've been asking this every time. So basically, if you could go back in time, let's say 21 years ago when you first entered, what advice would you give yourself?
Well, I knew you were going to ask that. I don't know what to say. I have to think about that for a second. I would say don't be afraid of failure, because there's definitely times where I was, maybe you take the easy way out because, it's safe and you get success from it. But also never say, I'm trying to put this in travel terms. When I travel, I put my earbuds in and I don't talk. And I think if I went back 20 years, I would tell myself, talk to the person next to you on the plane, talk to the person at the airport, because you just never know. And I don't do enough of that. So I'm kind of guilty of not taking my own advice, but definitely keep building those relationships. You just never know who you're sitting next to. And that's probably something I should even start doing more now. So.
That's awesome.
I was just thinking the same thing. I think everyone can work on that. It's easy to just unplug and yeah.
It's pretty amazing. To see that trend. I've, witnessed it, traveling as much as I do. I'm totally dating myself, I guess. Everyone in the airport or on the plane, they're just on their phones now. And I get it. That's kind of what a lot of this younger generation is doing, but it's kind of sad at the same time to have these organic conversations don't take place anymore. And that's something I wish, I would do more of, but ultimately I think everyone should do more of, because it's just, you never know. I've had some amazing conversations sitting next to some of the randomest people ever. And other times I just tune out and maybe there's a time and place for that, but I definitely go back and tell myself that, I think.
All right. I like that.
Well, cool, man. Thank you. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing the wisdom.
Yeah.
And
all right. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really like that episode. Kind of goes to show that really small pieces of advice, just as simple as taking your headphones out, can potentially make the world of difference for you and your career and your goals. So again, you never know who you might be sitting next to on a plane. People are nice, so talk to them and maybe they'll give you something. Again, we would love your feedback. This one was a little shorter, so let us know what you thought about that. If you like this length better, if you don't, tag some of your friends that you think would get something out of this. Make sure to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Share this with your friends. Get it in front of as many eyes as you can that you're willing to.
Thank you. And we will see you next week.
Thanks.